This nibble originally aired on RSBANDB Update, episode 816. Put a ring on it. Enjoy.
So my pick, I called it the Game Developer Appreciation Happy Hour, which is something I totally came up with myself just before the show. Yes, this is going to be a bit of a ramble, but, well, what else is the pick of the week for me at least, if not to have a little bit of a ramble? It was inspired by a tweet by CD Projekt, who is the developer, I believe, of Cyberpunk, which of course has
and The Witcher.
And of course The Witcher as well. But Cyberpunk is the one that is, it's the big one, and it had so much hype, and people really wanted it, and it was quite buggy and disappointing, and people were unhappy. And so now Cyberpunk got, or CD Projekt got hacked with some ransomware, and this is almost certainly related to CD Projekt, and I've not really kept up with the story. I'm pretty sure more things have happened since I first read about it, but it made me think about the level of entitlement that exists within gamers. How, like, we have talked about this on the show about how churn is a thing now these days, right? In games, in the game industry, and churn is that often to make a deadline in the games industry, you're required to overwork, basically work weekends, work late in the night for the weeks before the game is finished to finish it on time. Which is, of course, it leads to burnouts, it leads to physical complaints. It's bad, right? Like, anyone you ask, is churn a good thing? It's going to be like, no, right? Like, we know it's a bad thing. And I think even most players will say that churn is a bad thing. And yet it has become really prevalent in the games industry, and I think it is because expectations have grown so high, right? When a game comes out, we expect it to be the perfect game to hype up, and because so many games come out, the only way you can get your game to really be successful is by hyping it up like mad. Like, Cyberpunk was the hype of 2020, right? Like, you couldn't place a step on the internet and it would be Cyberpunk this and that. And,
yeah, they've become effectively like AAA movie launches.
Yes, pretty much. And we've seen games being procrastinated and deadlines being pushed, but in general, like, people want these deadlines to be hit. And when we're talking about they, it's investors, it's publishers, it's those who have the most to lose. It's never the developers. I can assure you that to live and work in the industry that is as harsh as the games industry, you have to be really passionate. So these people really want to put the best game in front of you, and
we can extend that out because it's not just the Cyberpunk people; it's everybody, even the people at Jagex.
Exactly, like it. There is this pressure from players to launch the perfect product on time at a decent price, and standards have risen. And sure, technology has gotten better, but if anything, the extra technology makes us expect more, and that requires more work from the developers. So, and at the same time, we are not willing to shell out $80 for a game these days.
No.
So we have been stuck at the $60 price point for almost a decade now, I want to say. So somehow these developers have to make better looking games with higher pressures than ever within that price range it's almost impossible. So when something like this happens, it it to me speaks to the difference that we have in perception at these players and the developers. And I think everybody is a loser in this case, right? Like everybody loses in the Cyberpunk scenario.
Yeah.
The developers weren't able to build the game they wanted to. I'm sure they wanted to ship something better. I'm also sure they probably would like some sleep, so they're probably pretty happy it was launched in that regard. Players wanted a game that actually worked. Investors didn't want the bad press. Like everybody loses. So what do we do about this? And I think, at least for me, I've not been hyped about a game really for a long time, because I think there's no reason to be hyped about a game until it's ready and out there.
And in some ways, because of that, I think some of the better games to play are the games that you don't have to wait for, that you don't have to invest that $60 to $80 for up front. Go for the free-to-play games that have varying degrees that you can choose to invest in them if you want to, accelerate your experience or have a different level of membership like RuneScape or Star Trek Online, for example.
Yeah, exactly. I think, personally, what I think is one of the big problems is the existence of pre-orders, right?
Yeah.
There seems to be this idea that you need to buy a game before it even comes out, which is it's a super weird concept. Like,
yeah, it goes back to the era when you had to, reserve it because there'd only be a certain number of boxed copies available.
Yeah, exactly. But now that it's no longer relevant, right?
Yeah.
And so you get this artificial shortage that developers make by pre-order bonuses. You get this skin if you order before the release date, which, why? This is my question. Like, I don't really get it. Like, to me, whenever I buy a game, especially one that I have to shell out $60 for, I read a lot of reviews and I want to watch a video of the gameplay and see, does this actually look like a game I'd enjoy playing? Because so often I've bought games that I don't end up playing, and it's just a waste of money. And if I had just spent 10 minutes doing some research, I could have saved myself that money.
Yeah.
So,
you're going to the area I want to, that I think is very important next, is that, we see all these folks like Cyberpunk and whatnot gathering, all the press, but there's so many also other indie games out there and smaller games that you can find on Steam that, to me, in the recent years have been so much more fulfilling than any of these other big blockbuster style games. And, one of the ones that always comes up in that mind for me is Factorio.
Yes, absolutely. It's a small team, but they got it right. And it's really interesting. In fact, it's funny you mentioned Factorio. So one of the things that Factorio does is the creators have said is, we don't do sales.
Yep.
Because it's quite ridiculous that I'm guilty of this. I'll gladly admit this, but it's kind of ridiculous that we look at a game and we're like, okay, I'll put it on my wish list, and when it's 90% off, then I'll get it. Which, if you think about it, is not really appreciating the effort of a developer. And sure, there's some games that I would never play if I had to pay full price for it, right? There are games that I maybe spend a few hours on. I'm not going to shell out even $20 for that. But sometimes I pick up a game on sale and I'm like, I would have paid more for this. And so I can see why the Factorio creators decided to just, we don't do sales. You either pay it or not, and
then
there's no
it's
point
always
in
going to be
waiting
that price.
So I know this was a bit of a rant, but what I really wanted to inspire in people is to give some more thought about this and be a bit more conscious about how you engage on the internet and how you think about these games, because I think that one of the most important things we do with games is we tell a story in some way. It's always about telling a story, about sharing an experience, about, something, right? Like it's an art. And I think the developers deserve the respect for that, and I think they get a lot of shit because they are always under pressure from the players and the publishers, and they do the best they can. And it's not their fault. I think they suffer as much as we do, but they tend to get the shit thrown on them. And that's what happened in this case. And it happens in many cases in many smaller ways. But whenever you are yelling at a developer on Reddit, then you're not barking up the right tree.
Yeah, you're not helping the discussion. And, there's good lessons for everybody involved in that. So I think that's important you talked about it, despite the fact it was about a negative story initially, and we've kind of turned it around at that point, so I'm very pleased. You can find full episodes of RSBANDB Update right here on this YouTube channel. If you found this video useful or just enjoyed it, like and subscribe, or leave a comment.